Hi, hi everyone. Welcome to the latest Tune In Tuesday with Cicerone Press. I'm Amy Hodkin, and it's lovely to be joining you from quite an overcast Cumbria, but thankfully the absolutely terrible weather from the past weekend has finally stopped. I'm really looking forward to this event tonight and hearing from our wonderful panelists about the Way of St Francis. We've got a real international mix of people tonight coming to you from all over the world. And yeah, it's really exciting to hear what they're going to have to say. So hosting this event is going to be Sandy Brown, who is the author of the Cicerone guidebook to the Way of St Francis. Sandy Brown is an author, community activist, long-distance walker, and ordained minister from Seattle, Washington. After reading The Pilgrimage in 1992, he planned his 2008 trek on the Camino de Santiago and has since then walked over 9,000 kilometers of pilgrim trails in Europe. He records his pilgrim adventures in his popular blog, www.caminoist.org. I'm going to pass it over to Sandy really shortly, and he can get on with introducing the Way of St Francis and our different guests. But just so you know, if you have any questions, I'll be taking those, and you can put them on Facebook as a comment in the chat section on Zoom if you're here in the webinar, and you can also send it to us via email live@ciceronepress.co.uk or on Twitter @CiceronePress. So however you want to do it, send us your questions and Sandy will put them to our guests. So Sandy, over to you.
Thanks very much, Amy. It's really a joy to be able to be here. And thanks for the honor of talking about the Way of St. Francis, which is one of my favorite pilgrimage trails in the world. It was my pleasure to walk it first in the year 2014 with a bunch of friends who had formerly walked the Camino de Santiago. And I think outside of Spain, the Way of St. Francis, or Via di Francesco, as we call it, in English, is one of the most popular pilgrimage routes that is out there. So we have a great selection of people to visit with us today about that. I want to invite them now to turn on their video so that I can introduce them to you. And the first is Gigi Bettin. I met Gigi in 2014 as I was studying Italian in Perugia. Hi, Gigi. And hello. Gigi, as well as working for Sfil of Umbria, is one of the most important stewards of the Via di Francesco. And he's been after this project for about the last 10 or 15 years, walking trails and painting signs and planning and describing it to people. And I think I can say with confidence that Gigi knows the Via di Francesco better than anybody. Gigi is going to give the first presentation to kind of lay out what the walk is like. And then it's great also to have with us Sara Zanni. And Sara's background is as an archeologist. Hi, Sara. As an archeologist, she lives in Ravenna right now, is in Milan, and has a PhD in archaeology, studied in Milan, Siena, and also in France. And so I'm very much looking forward to hearing what Sara has to say about the infrastructure distances of the walk and so on, and also about the archaeology of it. And then it's our pleasure also to have Liz Boulter. And Liz is the sub-desk travel editor for The Guardian News. And Liz walked the Way of St. Francis last year and did a very lovely article about it. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what Liz has to say about her experiences along the way in the walk. So I'm going to turn it over to Gigi to begin. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see his slides. And but Gigi, I'm so glad that you're here and you can take it away.
Okay. Thank you. I'm so glad of being here, you know, after such a presentation. But first of all, I'm so glad to be with Liz, Sara, and you, which are much more expert than me. So, talking about the way of St. Francis, well, first of all, sorry for my English. So if I said not the proper word, please correct me. Talking about the way of St. Francis, I will give you a general overview. In the map, you can see Tuscany, Umbria, and Lazio. And we have another region, Emilia-Romagna. So this pilgrimage trail cross 4 regions in the central part of, in Italy. One is Umbria, the Green Heart, of course. Another one is quite famous, which is Tuscany. Lazio, where it's Rome. And of course, there is Emilia-Romagna with Bologna and Rimini. From Emilia-Romagna, it starts in Rimini, so just nearby the Adriatic Sea. This trail, it's about 550 kilometers if you start from Florence to Assisi and then Rome, so following Sandy Brown's guidebook. The trails goes along, you should imagine, the Apennine mountains. So the Apennine, in Italy, we call it the spine of Italy. So it crosses the Apennine mountains, all Italy. You can imagine that the way of St. Francis goes along, just parallel to these Apennine mountains, to this spine, but not on top of the mountain, but it goes up and down along the hills. So, talking about the way of St. Francis, just Sandy show you Florence. Florence is the beginning of the way of St. Francis. But why the beginning? Why it goes from Florence to Assisi, then the Holy Valley in Rieti, and then to Rome? Because the way of St. Francis is not an historic trail like St. James or the pilgrimage to Rome or the pilgrimage, the historic pilgrimage to Jerusalem. It's a pilgrimage trail that links together the most important places where St. Francis lived and prayed. So I just want to point you out this, because along this way you can find, I would say, a piece of the soul of St. Francis. So in this picture you see Santa Croce, where Francis, he was there at the beginning of his pilgrimage, of his trips around Italy. You know that St. Francis used to walk a lot, like modern pilgrims. After Florence, you go south to Tuscany to reach one of the most important places in Tuscany related to St. Francis, which is Laburnum. Yes, here it is. Please, in this picture, just just focus on the rocks and on the green. What you see, the buildings were built mostly after St. Francis died. So this Laverna used to be an hermitage where St. Francis used to go for meditation, for isolation. Then we are going in the next slide. I'm going to focus on the difference between convents and hermitage, which is a very the strong identity of this way. Here we are in Assisi. Assisi is the birthplace of St. Francis and the place where he died and where he started his predication after refusing. I mean, he came from a rich family, you probably know, and refused all the money, all the power to become just poor and to be with the poor people. What you see now is the Basilica of St. Francis. This place used to call it once was the place where people were executed. So it was, the name was like Hell Hill. But after St. Francis died and he was buried inside the basilica below the Giotto's frescoes, was renamed as Heaven Paradise. In the next slide, you will see the Basilica of St. Francis from another point of view. So the basilica surrounded by the green. The green and the woods are, yes, this one, are something you can find all along this way, from Florence to Assisi and then Rome. After Assisi, you go through Old Umbria. Of course, between this selection of 5 most important places, there are lots of other important places, like, for example, Gubbio, where St. Francis became friend of a wolf, or as well Foligno, where he sold all the clothes of, because his father was a merchant. So he sold all the clothes of his family to restore, to rebuild a church. In this picture, going through, we go to Spoleto, so the holy mountain of Monte Luco, another beautiful place. So we go again south, crossing the Val Nerina, so the valley of River Nera, and finding the beauty of the Marmore waterfall, which I will show you later. Here we are in Lazio. So we started from Tuscany, we crossed the Umbria, and now we are at the beginning of Lazio. This is Greccio. Again, an hermitage. Again, you can see rocks and wood, which were the original sites beloved by St. Francis. After the Olive Valley, where you can find, this one is the sanctuary of Greccio, but you can find other 5 really important sanctuaries. You end your walk in Rome, which Rome. Why Rome? Because Francis went many times to Rome. In the picture, in the slide, you can see St. Peter, but originally at the time of St. Francis, St. Peter was not in this shape, but there was another basilica. He used to go to San Giovanni il Laterano, but of course Rome is a symbol of the Christianity and the Catholic religion, so related to St. Francis. Here we go. Well, I'm talking a lot about religion and religious sites, but according to the statistics, 60% of pilgrims walking this way, they declare themselves not into religion. So this is a point I want to stress. Why this the way of St. Francis? On this way, you walk with St. Francis, you touch the places where he lived, and in this you can find the identity of this way. Here, I mean, it's in these 2 slides. This one is the Eremo delle Carceri, so an hermitage on Mount Subasio, just below, over Assisi, watching Assisi from above. And hermitage is a hermitage, and convents are, I mean, the places where I can find the identity of this way. Hermitage, because for much part of his life, St. Francis wants to live on his own. This name, carceri, means prisons. So he wants to be on his own in isolation and contemplation. But we know that in the same time, and if we pass to the next slide, which is a convent, most part of his life was alternating meditation in this hermitage and living in convents. Convents usually were built in town, so to be just closer to the poor, to help people. In this case, we have Fonte Colombo, another sanctuary really important in the Lazio Valley. So if I try to make clear that while on St. James, the way of St. James, I would stress more the way instead of St. James. In the way of St. Francis, I would stress the accent on Francis himself, which, who is a man, I mean, for all time and for every time. It's a universal message. I mean, it's like a sort of way Gandhi or, I mean, just the other most important historical figures. If we go through the other slides quickly, because I'm going around, I just show you some signposting along the way. So the signposting is yellow and blue, mostly like St. Francis. Of course, as I promised, since St. Francis is the patron saint of the ecologist, nature, you can find, I mean, spirituality, not just in churches and monasteries, but as well in nature. This is the Marmore waterfall, the tallest man-made waterfall in Italy. Then, of course, there are lots. As I said, this is a way between sounds and silence. Sounds in the small villages in Lazio, in Umbria, and Tuscany, like this one, which is Campello. And of course, along this way, you can find another element, which is people. In this picture, you see the volunteers who send the credenziale, the pilgrim passport, all around the world, according as well with a cooperation with our American friends. So just quote, here we have Katia and Simone, and they take care not just of sending credential, but as well of each pilgrims that walks the way, and so on. I mean, this way it's created at, I mean, the overview belongs to the public governments, regional public governments, but as well community and volunteers are the soul, are the, I would say, the little brothers of St. Francis, and they take care, like Sebastiano in this picture, of the signposting and of the maintenance of the trail. So I will ask then Sara to get ready, and she's more technical than me. I just walk, and she will introduce you to the difficulties, to the terrain, to the technical stuff, and to the beauty of nature of this way. So I would like to pass the word to Sara. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gigi, and thank you, Sandy, for inviting me, and thank you to Cicerone Press. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is about the way of St. Francis from a technical point of view. So first of all, we should have again the map on another slide, on the next one. And here we go. So you can see that the way of St. Francis departs in this slide from Santuario della Verna, about which Gigi talked about. And Santuario della Verna is quite a very important waypoint in the Italian network of trails. So you can see Rimini that is marked to the northeast, and there is another very important trail starting from there. It's another Franciscan way. And then you can see, you can find other trail crossing the way of St. Francis. So you can find in Rome, of course, the Via Francigena, but also Il Cammino di Sant'Antonio, so St. Anthony's way, coming to La Verna too, and also the Via Romea Germanica that comes down to Italy from the north, so from Germany, and it crosses the way of St. Francis in La Verna again. So we've got many different trails that are now forming a sort of network. So they are collaborating in the late weeks to create a unique network of trails in Italy. But what should be like the walker who is going to deal with the St. Francis Way? It's a trail that's been planned more or less for everybody. So you can approach it, and there are several services that are integrating into the way. And so you don't need to be a Superman to walk St. Francis Way. Nevertheless, you need to consider that it's not a flat way. So as Gigi mentioned, it crosses the Apennine Mountains in several points. And it's true that it never goes to the top of the mountains. Nevertheless, it's never a flat way. So as you can see from this technical sheet, you will have some 12 kilometers on the third line. You can see the distance and then the elevation. So you will have some short legs, some short stages, so not very long days, like, for example, some stages on the St. James Way, but they're always quite steep. So you always need to check the elevation profile, the altimetry, and to be sure of what you're going to do. You are going to enjoy it a lot, but you always need to take your time and not to underestimate it. Of course, you can pick what you want. You are not compelled to walk it straight away, the whole length at once. But you can also choose to walk it 1 week at a time. So you will find many, for example, many tour operators are working on the trail. And they offer you some services like luggage transport, so you don't need to carry your full backpack on your back. And of course, now we are seeing something else that is very interesting to me, since as Sandy mentioned earlier, I'm an archaeologist. So I want to give you some spots to think about, also beyond St. Francis, because Gigi talked a lot about the identity of the route. But in Italy, as you well know, it's impossible to walk and to travel without crossing a lot of archaeological places and a lot of history and of history of art. So, for example, here you have the bridge of the towers in Spoleto, il Ponte delle Torri, that now you cannot walk it because of the earthquake some years ago, but it's a very important place, and you can see it from the way of St. Francis. And Spoleto itself is a very important city that you can visit, stopping by along the way. It's a Roman city, so you will find the Roman theater in the very center of the city. Of course, Roman houses, the amphitheater that is now incorporated in a monastery. So you won't see it, but you will see the shape of it in the modern buildings. The city gate, and also, of course, the cathedral, that is a unique piece of art, of Italian art. So you will have a huge choice of different periods to look at. And Campello sul Clitumno, you've already seen the castle, some slides before, the walled city. And there you will find two different places. In the lower city, there are the sources of the river Clitumno that were made famous by Byron, for example. And Clitumno has a beautiful park when it burns, and also the small Lombard temple that is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Within the Lombards in Italy, places of the power spread site. It's quite a singular place. And also there is the castle that was the ancient center of power in Campello sul Clitumno, and it's very well preserved. So you will have a beautiful place, a medieval place. And also here you have the Trevi olive groves that are FAO landscape, protected landscape, because of the production of olive oil. You have a very different, here is Trevi, of course. They also have poppies. How do you call the red flowers in English, Sandy? It's poppies.
Poppies, that's right.
Poppies, yes. They were fully flourished last year. So you have a full range of opportunities to discover about Italy and Italy's history along the St. Francis Way. And now I think it's time for me to pass the word to Liz.
Thanks very much, everybody. Sara, Gigi, Sandy. Yes, I did the section of the Way of St. Francis with my husband last year and absolutely loved it. But as Gigi said, most of the people who walk the footpath are not religious at all, and that certainly applies to me and my husband. So we did wonder, is it really going to be for us? We've no intention of doing any penance or self-denial. We're not saintly at all, but of course it's absolutely delightful. And anyway, particularly this year in post-pandemic 2020, who could possibly argue with the message of St. Francis, the first ecologist? Peace, universal love, respect for the natural world, all the things that people have been celebrating, especially since coronavirus. And a simple life with fewer possessions, if not as few possessions as he had. So my husband, Colin, and I haven't really got any time for organised religion, but we absolutely love long walks and we love Italy and the food and the wine. And so we chose to do about a 110-kilometre walk in 7 days, starting at Francis Central, Assisi, or down to Piediluco in Lazio. And I think Sara mentioned lots of travel companies do offer trips on the Via di Francesco. But I may not be religious, but I do have a conscience about my carbon footprint. And it seemed a shame to do a nice low carbon walking holiday, but then have somebody driving a taxi with our luggage throughout the route. So we decided to try and do it on our own, just carrying what we needed on our backs. And because it was July, it wasn't a problem, because we didn't need very many clothes. We did end up slightly emulating St. Francis in having very few possessions, because we would only take what we absolutely needed to carry rather than making extra weight on our backs. So Francis had only a robe, a staff and a girdle. We only had a small rucksack each. Well, you know, spare clothes, sun cream, phones, and most important of all, Sandy's book. But rather than giving our other stuff away to the poor like Francis did, we just left it in the hotel. It was rather mad to do it in July, right at the tail end of a massive heat wave that they had in 2019, but it meant there was no problem drying your clothes overnight. So drinking water was an issue because it was so hot. We had to carry at least the 1.5 litres each that is recommended. So obviously by the end of the day, that's got to be a lot less heavy because you've drunk it all. So yes, we started from Assisi, and now St. Francis thought Assisi was a distraction from spiritual life in the 13th century. I don't know what he'd think of it today with all its gift shops and tour guides and big coach parties. But it's easy, as everybody knows, is to avoid large groups of tourists just by going early or getting away from the tourist centres. So early one morning we set off from Assisi and it was quiet. You could just hear birds singing, cicadas, maybe the faint singing of a few nuns, which was very pleasant. Things Francis would have heard anyway. So maybe we can have the first slide, please, Sandy. Sandy's book told us that on the first day there was a choice of easy and hard routes. Well, this is my husband at the top of one of the hard bits of the hard routes, being a bit of a mountain goat. This is on the way to the Eremo delle Carceri, which we saw in Gigi's slide. We decided to take the path of virtue and not take the easy route there, but go on the hard route, and it was really worth it. Though there were a few other visitors up there who'd come in a minibus. I mean, how saintly is that? And there is Colin as we were coming down the other side after Eremo delle Carceri, and that view over the Valle Umbra is what you see for a lot of the route going from Assisi down towards Spoleto. Not all the route is that steep, but as Gigi said, you're walking along the Western Apennines, so it's a lot of up and down. This is going back down into towards Spello, and that's quite hard as well because the gravel paths can be quite slippery. But you know, no pain, no gain. Every day we would stop. Having sometimes struggled, I have to say, with the signage, because as you can see from this picture, some of it is rather damaged by the sunshine. The two on the top right are just completely white, and other ones are sort of crumbling away. But I'm sure it's being worked on every year. And then we'd stop. Yeah, water was the issue, as I said, and this is a fountain outside Spoleto, which is about the only source of drinking water we found on our week. So you really did need to fill up right at the beginning. So going back to religion, I went to a convent school and I didn't really have happy memories of the nuns, but the ones at Eremo delle Allodole, which is Skylark Hermitage, delightful, were lovely. And if the nuns had been like Sister Lucia, I'd have had a very different attitude to religion, maybe. Staying overnight, there's a lot of hostels and sort of bothy type spaces that if you're really doing it on a budget, you can stay in along the route. But we had nice hotels booked throughout and nice restaurants. This is in Spello, called Osteria de Dada, and I thought the food there was a sort of thing Francis might have eaten. This is hot bread made with lard, flatbreads made with lard, straight hot out of the pan, and some good red wine. And then on the next slide, we had a delicious meal at Locanda in Trevi, and the food was really high calorie, but the great thing about doing a long walk is that you can eat lots of calories. There was this was followed by tortellini and cream sauce, and I just lapped it all up because I knew there'd be some steep climbs the next day, so it's fine. The low points, well, they were mostly to do with my carelessness. I let my there's Colin. That's Colin having my husband having a sleep in a meadow as we stopped for lunch one day. I let one of my socks get swept off a windowsill, and it was the only pair I had, so I had to hunt around the town till I found it. I lost my hairbrush in another hotel and had to manage with a toothbrush for several days, but hey, I offered it up. There's something really satisfying about a long distance trail. You're moving on each day, the scenery changes, and it gets quite meditative. You're just walking along in the march of your feet. And we had a few bad times when we had to encourage each other. It was quite a bonding experience. This is a lady called Rosa Orazzi who runs a bar in Porretta along the road, and she's very fond of talking to the pilgrims when they come through. Porretta, we'd had a bit of a low point when we felt we'd arrived in the village and then found our hotel was another 1.5 kilometers up a steep hill, but you know, we coped. There's a wooden sign called a tau that some people carry as they're walking on the St. Francis route, but we're a bit squeamish about organized religion and didn't really fancy carrying that. And above Ciselli, we actually met a group who were carrying a cross just like they were Jesus and had a monk in their number, but generally you didn't see an awful lot of religion along the route. And even for those who are complete heathens like Colin and me, the trek is fantastic. There's so many standout moments, such as the dizzying views over the Nera Valley, the Marmore waterfalls, and Lake Piediluco, which is like being in the Alps. And the thing about doing this walk is that we weren't just looking at the beautiful woods and mountains, we were just spending many, many hours among them, thinking about them, letting it fill our senses. And I don't think St. Francis could really object to that. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Liz. And thank you also to Gigi and Sara. Wow, what an outstanding presentation of this fabulous walk. So I know that we're getting questions in from our viewers, but I have a few of my own to begin with. And I want to start with the relationships among the different regions. So a couple of the maps that we saw earlier showed mostly Umbria and maybe a little bit of Lazio and a little bit of Tuscany. So would you say that Umbria is the heart of this and that Tuscany and Lazio are less important? Or would you say that that all three regions, walking from Florence to Assisi all the way to Rome, are the best representation of the walk? Maybe that's a question for you, Gigi.
Okay, this is a difficult question. Well, as I said, as the way links many important places related with St. Francis, you can find the place where you belong, the place where you can where you can feel more St. Francis. So I wouldn't say, I mean, from one point of view, there is no way without a destination. So usually in a Christian pilgrimage, the destination is the tomb of the saints. So St. James in Spain, St. Peter in Rome, and I mean, in Jerusalem, I mean, the place where Jesus died. This way is particularly because your guidebook starts from Florence and ends in Rome. It should end in Assisi, but it's not. And your readers love to end in Rome. Some people start in Rome and they don't end up in Assisi. I mean, they arrive in Assisi, they go to the tomb, but they go up to Laverna. So it's an Italian way. You can choose your destination. So, and all the places can be different, and I wouldn't set a priority, unless, I mean, from a religious point of view, if you want to go to the tomb of St. Francis.
Yeah, that's great. Now, given the fact that it's not a historical route like the Via Francigena or the Way of St. James, but it's a collection of St. Francis sites, is it confusing when there are other routes than the Via di Francesco? So one of the signs that Liz showed in one of the pictures had a Via di Francesco sign, and then a couple of Club Alpino Italia signs, and I didn't notice closely, but there might have been a Di qui passò Francesco sign or two there as well. So are there other routes, and is it clear which route a hiker is on and should choose?
Okay. First of all, of course, we are the country of creativity and spontaneity. So, but I would first of all said that it's well marked. So, I mean, just be confident. And in the next end of August, all the signposting, the vertical, the one Liz showed you, will be renewed. So due to the COVID, we couldn't do that on winter. Yes, straight to the point. I mean, there is one way made by French people. They start the Chemin d'Assise. They start in Vézelay and arrive in Assisi. Then we have the Cammino Francescano della Marca, another way of the Franciscan way from Assisi to Marche, to Ascoli Piceno. Then Cammino di Assisi. The first man in history who wrote a guidebook was a Dutch man from Holland, appunto, Kees Rodenburg. The first Italian was a woman, I mean, is a woman, she's still alive, I mean, as Angela Serracchioli. So this, from one hand, means St. Francis can tell you something, means in this contemporary world, people have questions, want to meet him in a way. Of course, from a signposting point of view, especially in the previous year, I would say till 3 or 4 years ago was a problem. Now signposting is going better and better and better.
Very good. Well, I want to ask you one more question, and Gigi, and that is, where do you get your haircut? Because I'd like to know.
Don't say that. My mom is watching me, and then she's gonna be upset with me. But Sara as well has got a very haircut.
Oh, come on. I just had a problem with my shampoo yesterday.
Okay.
This is unfair.
So I have a question for Liz. And Liz, tell us about footwear. Some of those trails that were in your pictures show some rocks and maybe some slippery areas. Did you find that to be an issue? And what did you use and what would you recommend?
I would recommend a good pair of solid walking boots. Mine are Berghaus, if that's not a problem to mention. Light, but sort of really sturdy. But having said that, my husband Colin did it in a pair of what we call trainers in the UK, ordinary sports shoes, and he was fine. It's not. I've done worse. It's mostly footpaths. You're not really. He decided to climb up that big rock, but it's not mostly like that. It's footpaths. It can be done in there.
Okay, so even trainers could work, but you recommend boots.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you. Question for Sara now. This archaeological piece is so interesting, and you brought up the various different sites in Spoleto. Now, everybody is watching to see when the Ponte delle Torri is going to open back up. And do you know anything about that? And tell us also about the age of things. There's a big fortress on the top of Spoleto. Where's that from? Is that another Roman piece?
Oh, well, so the Ponte delle Torri, I don't really know when they're going to open it again. We are all looking forward to walking back on it. And I really did hope to lead a group of people last year, but it was impossible. As long as it was impossible to lead them in the ancient railway, we had been planning to walk along the ancient railway that leads to Norcia, Gigi, exiting
right.
from Spoleto, but the tunnels are not doable yet because always of the earthquake. And well, in Spoleto you can find many different periods because the castle on the top of the city is from the Albornoz period, but there was also a castle in the Frederick II period. So probably there was also a Roman site below it, but it's been covered. We cannot demolish the fortress. It's not a good idea. So we cannot do the excavation. But anyway, there was the center of the city, the forum, was very close to the cathedral, and then the amphitheater was in the lower city also. So you had the whole hill that was covered by the Roman city, and also Trevi had a Roman level, but always the Roman period you can find it in the lower part of the valley along the Clitunno River, because of course in the Roman period it was safer to travel. You could use the Roman ways, and they always used to run in the lower part of the valleys. Then in the Middle Age, people moved on the top of the hills because of safety.
Very good. Thank you, Sara. Now we have some questions from our viewers. And the first couple of questions are about tent camping on the Way of St. Francis. One person says, as I prefer hiking with a tent, I would be interested to know if camping is at all possible on the route. And if that's why, another question is if that's wise on a backpack due to weight. So I don't know if any of you saw campers on your walks. Gigi, do you see many people camping on the Via di Francesco?
Yes, especially this year. As you all know, I mean, no, probably no, but after the 4th of June, the border between the regions in Italy, they were open. So people can start again traveling. And so the 4th, the same day, like 2 people starting with the tent. You can see them on the Facebook group Via di Francesco, mostly in Italian, and the Way of St Francis, the one for English speakers. So in Italy, camping, I mean, in the nature is allowed without fire and only from the sunset. So when the sun comes down and to the dawn, when the sun rises, just that. Of course, even if now everything is open, there are some restrictions now due to the COVID. So if you better go to camping, of course, for safe reason, because of the hygienization and sanitation of the things you may need at night. And so the answer is yes, people are using the tent. My suggestion is, of course, please balance the backpack, because since it's a hard way, I mean, if the tent has its own weight, you should not go more, using your backpack more than 7-8 kilos.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you, Gigi. Another viewer is asking the question, please talk a little bit about the spirituality of the trail. And now, so maybe this should go to Liz, because you brought up that you're not so religious, but what about spirituality in general? Was there something unique about this, do you feel?
There was definite feel of spiritual feel about certain parts of the walk. I'll particularly say when we went to, I was talking about Sister Lucia in the Eremo delle Allodole. She was just delightful. She was so calm and smiley and non-judgmental. And as she was talking to us, a butterfly just came and landed on her arm. And it felt almost like the sort of thing that might have happened with St. Francis talking to the birds. And then, so we were in a sort of uplifted mood as we left. And I don't know whether that was that, but the bird song and the sounds of nature around just seemed particularly loud as we left that hermitage. It was beautiful.
That is beautiful. Sarah, what does an archaeologist find in terms of spirituality on this walk?
Well, I wanted to add something about the hermitage, the Eremo delle Allodole. The community that was founded to restore the place was composed by a mixed community of different religions. So there was also a nun who came from Great Britain and who was not Catholic. She was oh, help me. She was
a Protestant, Church of England?
Protestant, yeah, of course. And so it tells you something about the spirituality of the whole way of St. Francis, because he was not a fundamentalist. He was a very welcoming person. And it's the same all along the way. So you can find the culture of hospitality that is very profound, very deep, all along the way from Florence to Rome. So, and it's also something that Gigi said. So the love for nature, for the peace of the whole way. So you can really find God in nature. There was a philosopher who said that if you cannot find God anywhere, you can try to look for him in the nature. That it's his first creature.
That's beautiful. That sounds very Franciscan, doesn't it? Gigi, what about you on spirituality in this walk? You've already talked a little bit about it.
Yes. Well, I want to share something personal. So if we are talking between friends, it's important to do that. One of the most spiritual moments for me was once during the leg between Città di Castello and Pietralunga, so in the northern part. So it was 5 o'clock because I was in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. I woke up to avoid the hot. And so walking, I saw the web of a spider with, you know, the little drops of water, the dew is the correct word. So dew. And I was staring at it, and it was perfect. You know, the web of the spider with these small dots of water. And it was like, whoa, you know, it's like I'm gonna get the sense of universe. That I didn't get it, and I start walking again. But it happens on the way. When, I mean, we say that if you walk away, it works when something can change your life. It doesn't mean that you have to see other words or discover the meaning of the existence. It's that by walking, by touching sacred places like the Franciscan sanctuaries, but except, for example, below on the other part of the bridge you saw, it's Monte Luco. Monte Luco, it's a sacred mountain since Roman times. Romans Romans were builders. They used to build bridges and roads, but they know the limit. They said, we cannot destroy the nature. So they have places like Monte Luco, Lucus, so sacred woods. And there was these stones with carved, you know, the prohibition to cut trees there. And after Romans, you know, the hermits from Syria escaping during the war of images, they flowed there. So spirituality, yes, you can find in the nature, in the places, in the caves. I especially find in the caves which were the first places, sites where St. Francis wants to be. St. Francis didn't go to the convents. St. Francis went to the, used to sleep on the stones. So just in the caves, because they remind him the wounds of Jesus from a Christian point of view. To me, rocks are really strong, I mean, powerful.
That's great. Gigi, thank you so much. We have a comment from Marta Signy, who says hello, and says also, especially, nature is important during this time of the COVID pandemic, because we can all become closer, maybe not to each other so much, but to nature and their experience spirituality. I want to say that for me personally, I find spirituality on this trail as I think of who is accompanying me. So when I walk the Camino de Santiago, I think about St. James walking alongside me. But on the Via di Francesco, I think about St. Francis walking. And then I feel connected when I go to some place like Laburnum, and there in the Basilica is a robe that he wore. And I can think about him actually wearing that robe and walking alongside me. And in the lower Basilica de San Francisco in Assisi, there is his tomb. And on the four corners are tombs of his friends. And so I think about community when I see that also. Then I go to Spoleto, and one of my favorite places is actually in the Duomo, where I put my euro coin into the machine and the light turns on, and then you can see the handwritten note of St. Francis right there. And imagine that you could read his handwriting and think about what he was writing about. Well, so I want to thank each of you very much. Liz, begin with you. Thank you for taking time from your work at The Guardian to share with us. And your
pleasure.
Your description makes me want to be there right now. And I'm glad you had such a great time. And Sara, your archaeological background, and especially around Clituno, what interest, and Spoleto, what interesting material to know. And I learned something by virtue of what you said today. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Sandy.
And Gigi, it's always a pleasure to see you. I wish that I could meet your mother, but if she's on the line there, I want to. And so, Gigi, it's always a pleasure. And thank you for your spirit that has helped make the Way of St. Francis, the Via di Francesco, such a wonderful walk that's open now to the whole world. And I hope to get there soon myself, as soon as the EU allows Americans in. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back to Amy. And Amy, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And thank you, Gigi, Sara, Liz. That has been so inspiring. And, you know, I just wish I could put my boots on and set off and do this walk and discover all these amazing places that you've been talking about. Yeah, I'm trying to think what I meant to say now, actually, because I'm just so overwhelmed by all those wonderful stories. So thank you so much to our guests. Thank you, Sandy, for this another pilgrimage special as part of our Tune In Tuesdays. Yeah, we're going to be putting this up on YouTube and it'll be on our website. So, you know, if you didn't have a chance and you want to watch it back, you can do it there. Otherwise, yeah, you can join us for future events on Tuesdays live on Facebook and on Zoom. And you can find all about that on our website. All the events will be there. And yeah, sign up for our newsletter and join our Facebook group, Cicerone Connect. Now, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.